Okay, hey everybody. Good evening. I hope everyone is doing well. Welcome to the last live stream of the 2018 academic year. The review for the final. Yes. Yay. Okay, I hope everyone had a good day today. I hope everyone had a good time with their chemistry exam. I hope everyone was relatively successful in their chemistry exam, and that it went well. And now we can dedicate ourselves totally, completely, fully to history. Well, not really fully to history because we have the you have, I think, Hebrew on Friday also. So yeah, so we're gonna do this for a while. Got my coffee ready to go. You guys can hear me. Just want to make sure you guys can hear me okay. We'll do this for however long we want to tonight. We'll go for a while. Obviously, big game tonight. In sorry, big game tonight. NBA Finals, Game 3. Starts at 9 o'clock. So we'll we'll go and as if we're still going at that point, we'll put on the game and watch it. So it should be, it should be fun. And yeah, so we already see questions coming in. Um, 5 million views and no final. No, there's going to be a final. Sorry guys, final is we don't mess with the final. Final's going to happen. I know it's annoying, it's frustrating. So let me just lay out the ground rules for tonight for the questions. I'm not going to talk about specifically the essay questions. Don't ask me to answer the essay questions for you. You have the essay questions. It's up to you to make up the thesis. It's up to you to construct the outline. I'm not gonna actually answer the essay questions. If you have questions about some of the content that excuse me goes into the questions, I'm happy to address that, but I'm not going to answer all of the I'm not going to answer the questions themselves. Okay. All right, so let's deal with some of the questions here. And let's see. When we get to a question, let's see, can we do this here? No, we can't. Okay. So yeah. So wow, a lot of questions already. We'll get to as many as we can. This is from Shira. This is the first question. Who is in which alliance? Shira, just to be clear, I assume you mean the First World War, or the lead up to the First World War. I don't know if that's what you mean, but if that's the case, you do have to know the alliances sort of in the alliance system leading up to the First World War. The Three Emperors League, Otto von Bismarck, which brought together Germany, Austria, and Russia. The Triple Alliance, Germany, Austria, and Italy. The Reassurance Treaty. The eventually in the early 20th century, the late 19th century, the alliance that exists between France and Russia in the late 19th century, and then England establishing the Entente Cordiale with France and with Russia, and that really leads to, again, one of the causes of the First World War. That, in addition to the crisis in the Balkans, where you have Balkan states, specifically you have Bosnia, for instance, the Bosnian crisis, as it's known, with Austria-Hungary, and Russia. Austria wants to control all of Bosnia and Herzegovina. Russia agreed to support that for support of the control, the Russian control of the Dardanelles, taking that away from the Ottoman Empire, so that Russia could use it for its to send ships through, and so and so that was the other lead up to the war itself, and then obviously you have the actual trigger of the war itself, the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand on June 28th, 1914, and then with the alliance system in place, you have the breakdown of the different sides. You have you have Great Britain, you have France, you have Russia on one side, you have Germany, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, the Ottoman Empire on the other side. And that sort of the chain reaction leads to the outbreak of the war itself. Okay, awesome. Let's see. I'm gonna look through these questions. Some of them I'll take them in order, some of them not. The Wannsee Conference, I think that's from Zach. I think that's what you mean, Zach, when you explain the Waynes Conference. I think you mean the Wannsee Conference by that, but okay. By the way, this is 4 shots of espresso with almond milk mixed with coffee. So we're gonna, be on a caffeine night tonight. Anyway, so the Wannsee Conference is the conference in which the Nazis come to a final determination as to the final solution. Remember, Heydrich has given the order to Himmler to go and to plan out the Wannsee Conference, something that we mentioned, I think, in all of the classes, so that Heydrich actually gets to plan or to put into place the various plans for the final solution. Some sort of indicates that there was no major plan put into place, or if there was, it wasn't known to, it was Göring, excuse me, not Himmler. It wasn't known to Göring, and so he tells Heydrich to put the plan into place. And so in January of 1942, meeting is held at the Wannsee Villa outside in Berlin, and the discussion really focuses on logistics. The underlying aspect, the underlying tone, the underlying message, I think, was already known. That the point was to move away from relocating the Jews to actually murdering them. So I think that's the main thrust of the Wannsee Conference. Okay. Let's see. This is from Sam. Do we need to know the exact buildup of World War I, like every small event that happens? I want to reiterate something that I said and I've been saying when we've been taking exams throughout the year, and something that I want to reiterate with this exam specifically. You do not, and I do not expect you to know every single detail. It's impossible to. The questions are open-ended. The essay questions are open-ended. You have a lot of ways to answer the essay questions both in H and in A. You don't need to include every single detail. You can include every single detail. And this is the case also with the questions in the third part, the short answer questions. It's literally impossible to add all of the detail. What I want to see is that you know what you're talking about, and you can provide you can provide an answer to the question, if not talking about the entirety of of what the question is asking for, providing to me a sense that you know what you're saying, what you're talking about. So I'm not gonna, on the final, I'm not gonna play gotcha. I'm not gonna. I didn't try to in any way to try to get you to try to sorry guys to get you in any way. I want to see what you guys are able to understand as you review the material. I'm not looking to trick you, so I'm not expecting you to remember every single detail. Obviously, you have to know some of the big events. And so, again, to Sam, answer your question, if we're talking about the First World War, if I ask you to sort of look at the causes of the war, you have to mention the causes we just went through. Do you have to talk about every single detail in those causes? No, but you have to mention, or at least make it clear that you know what you're talking about, and that's important. Okay. Okay. Let's see more questions here. League of Nations, 14 points. Remember, the 14 points was what Woodrow Wilson suggested for creating a lasting peace following World War One. Some of his ideas become part of the Treaty of Versailles. But remember, Wilson had a very different tone and tenor than what Britain and France were looking to do to the Germans following the First World War. Britain and France were not interested in reconciliation. They were not interested in creating a lasting peace. They were interested in punishing Germany primarily. And so while they take, for instance, the 14th point of Wilson, which is the League of Nations, they don't do a lot with the rest of his stuff, a lot of what he's trying to do, because remember, Wilson's looking to create a peaceful solution. And that's something that they're interested that he's interested in doing, but not really the French and the British. Okay. Let's see. Okay. Blah blah blah. Do we have to know the reading from the last test for the final? That's from Kayla Waitman. No, we don't. Okay. Did Hitler use communism or fascism to gain control and carry out his plan? You want to say hi?
Hi, guys.
I don't think I see.
I'm a figment of imagination. It sounded like,
yeah,
you guys are going to be great.
Hopefully. Jessica's going to do all of the grading, guys, okay?
And then that is a huge benefit to all of you, because
it is.
My history skills are amazing. They're so good. They're amazing.
Not so much.
When did World War I happen?
1755.
That is not true.
Okay. Nice. Okay. Yeah, back to it, guys. Okay. Let's see. Yeah. Okay, let's look at more questions here. Did Hitler use communism or fascism to gain control and carry his plan? Nazism is a form of fascism. So, and remember, fascism fascism and communism are not friends with each other, despite the fact that the Soviet Union and Nazi Germany do make a secret alliance, a pact, a non-aggression pact in the summer of 1939. They agree not to attack each other. Nonetheless, they are not friends with each other. So yeah, was the moon landing real, Brian? I don't know. It's tough to say. There's a lot of evidence to the contrary, but it's a good question. Okay, this is from Shayna. What was the policy of appeasement? The policy of appeasement is the policy adopted during the 1930s, primarily by Britain and France, towards Germany, of giving in to Hitler's demands. This came largely from the realization, particularly by Great Britain, but also by France, that Germany, after the First World War, really was punished too harshly, and so they felt that they had to actually give back to them, and so they felt like they had to give Germany something in return for really being punished very harshly, and really not doing very well during the course of the 1920s. And so it's largely the work of Neville Chamberlain and others in the British government to give Hitler what he wants, as long as it wasn't harmful. And so when Hitler demanded the conquest, when Hitler and Nazi Germany conquered Austria, they gave in. When Nazi Germany in 1935 began to build up their military in direct violation of the Treaty of Versailles, they began to build up their Luftwaffe, their air force. Again, they looked aside when Hitler demanded the Sudetenland, part of Czechoslovakia. They met in the Munich conference, and they gave it. So that was the nature of the policy of appeasement. Okay. Okay, which countries are part of the League of Nations? You don't really need to know that. What you do need to know, though, is that the United States is not a part of the League of Nations when it is created. Okay, do we need to know the information of the ghettos we did in the projects on? No, there's nothing on the test that asks you about either the ghettos you worked on or the ghettos that other people worked on. Do you have to know all different types of Zionism? You do need to know the different types of Zionism. Okay. Can I explain the Russian Revolution? Wow, that's a lot. Lenin, Trotsky, Bolshevik, Stalin. So there's a lot there. There's a lot in terms of the Russian Revolution. So let me go through some of those details. This will cover, I think, I saw there were a couple of other questions about the Russian Revolution. So let me just go through a couple of the key aspects of the Russian Revolution. Remember, Russia, through the course of the 19th and early 20th centuries, is ruled by a monarchy, the Tsar. The Tsar is the king. It's a total and complete monarchy. There's autocratic rule where government is censoring the newspapers. There's secret police monitoring. The problem, though, or not the problem, but the interesting part about Russia is that Russia is sort of lagging behind the rest of Europe, particularly when it comes to industrialization. If you remember, when we talked about the Industrial Revolution, Great Britain begins to industrialize during the course of the early 19th century. It takes until much later for Russia to industrialize. They don't really industrialize well until the early 19th century. Excuse me, the late 19th century. And so when they begin to do so, they need partners. That's why they turn to France, by the way, to create a partnership, an alliance. It's not just a military alliance they create with France, but it's an economic alliance. France invests huge amounts of money into Russia, primarily to build up the Russian infrastructure. Russia doesn't have the railroad system that the rest of Europe does. The problem with all of this, though, is with industrialization, and this is a hallmark of industrialization, you have discontent, you have disagreement over working conditions and wages. We saw this when we talked about England, where the rise of the factories brings about the rise of terrible working conditions. What happens in Russia, though, is that the Russian workers begin to look towards the work of Karl Marx. Remember, Karl Marx was writing in the middle of the 19th century as a response to industrialization, and so there is a growing popularity in the works and the ideas of Karl Marx, particularly that at some point, and this is the ideals of Karl Marx, at some point in the future, the proletariat or the workers will eventually rise up over the bourgeoisie, will rise up over the middle class factory owners. And so there was a growing popularity and a growing interest in his work, in his ideas. Sorry, guys, it's these allergies that are just a killer. And so one of the earliest leaders of the Bolsheviks is Vladimir Lenin. He's an organizer. He's an inspiring leader. In addition, you have Trotsky, who becomes part of the Russian Revolution just prior to the October Revolution of 1917. Lenin actually is forced to go into exile because of his involvement in Bolshevism. Bolsheviks are, again, Marxists who believe the ideas in Karl Marx, favor revolution by a small committed group. But remember, again, during the course of the early 20th century, the Tsar is still in control. And over the course of the early 20th century, the Tsar makes a number of different mistakes. And so in 1905, in the wake of the Russo-Japanese War, the hundreds of thousands of workers march on the Tsar's palace, demanding reforms. The army fires into the crowds, killing many people. In response to growing unrest, the Tsar creates the Duma, the Russian parliament. The Duma doesn't really meet with any regularity, and so there's no and so people are not satisfied with that. And then obviously Russia is brought into the First World War, and with the First World War, you have increased taxation, you have starvation, resources are taken from the people, or they're being put to the army. This is true, by the way, in not just in Russia, but in many other countries also. The Tsar decided to take personal leadership of the Russian forces. And in March of early 1917, workers began to strike in places, specifically in St. Petersburg. And on March 15th, the Tsar decided to abdicate. He gave up his throne, realizing he did not have popular support. Now, control of the government, therefore, went to the Duma, the legislative body who called for national elections. Now, there were at this time different revolutionary groups in Russia. You have the Bolsheviks, who we talked about. Bolsheviks are Marxists. They believe in the ideas of Karl Marx. They believe in communism. They believe in the communist ideal. They believe in radical reform. You also then have what are the other group, the Mensheviks. During the Russian Civil War, the Bolsheviks will be the red, the Mensheviks will be the white. In large part, the Mensheviks favored gradual reform, higher wages, increased suffrage. The Bolsheviks were, in essence, extreme. And under the control of Vladimir Lenin, they begin to make their case to the people of Russia, and they're hoping to gain control of the Russian government. But in the elections that were put into place by the Duma to lead to a new government, the Bolsheviks actually did a very poor job. They did not actually achieve a majority of seats in the Duma. And when the Duma first met in January of 1918, the Bolshevik army basically forced them to disperse, and they took control of government. And the Bolsheviks took control of government. They nationalized lands. They gave it to peasants. Factory workers are put in charge of plants. Remember, Russia decides to extricate itself, to take itself out of the First World War, and so they make it an alliance with, they make it an agreement with Germany, and then at that point in late 1917, the Russian Civil War begins, and the Russian Civil War lasts from 1917 to 1922, and so. It actually is, in terms of the war itself, while it lasted until 1922, by 1920, basically, the Bolsheviks had consolidated power and taken power. That being said, Lenin, as the leader of Russia, realized that that the economy was staggering along, and so Lenin decides to adopt a new economic policy. The new economic policy, the NEP, is somewhat of a move away from communism, in that it allowed for and tolerated private ownership of businesses and of property. Peasants could farm for profit. It moved away from the communist ideal, created a mixed state economy, a move away from government controlling all different parts of the economy, which really was what communism was all about. But the NEP was pretty successful, but it split the Communist Party into two camps. And so when Lenin dies in 1924, you have two different camps within the leadership of the Communist Party. You have one section led by Trotsky, the other led by Stalin, and eventually Stalin wins out. Stalin initially did not support the NEP, while Trotsky saw that it was important to keep the NEP in place Stalin actually came out against the NEP, and so that became a popular position. Stalin uses his position to edge out Trotsky, and Trotsky in 1927 was basically out of the leadership and forced to leave Russia in 1929. He was murdered in 1940. So I think there's a lot there with the with the Russian Revolution. Okay. Let's see. From Evan, what is meant by the long 19th century? So again, that term is just used to, so that's part of the essay question. It's the second essay question, I believe, that I asked. We use that term in introducing the 19th century back during the second quarter. I explained it in the essay question itself. It means that the 19th century has an effect far beyond the chronological years of the 19th century. Remember, we talked about the 19th century as not just ending in 1899, but continuing on. And so the long 19th century means that it starts, earlier, as we said during the second quarter, it starts before the year 1800. It starts with the French Revolution, and goes beyond the end of it in 1899. It goes beyond of it into the 20th century. Okay. Zach Gold, how many questions do we have to answer in the short answer question section? I believe it's 5. I think it's 5 out of 11 in the A and 5 out of 12 in the H. Okay. So yeah. Sammy, were there 2 separate revolts in Russia? So yeah, meaning we call it the Russian Revolution. There were 2 sort of key moments. Again, the first was in March of 1917, and then the second was in October, November of 1917. Those are the 2 key moments of the Russian Revolution. It's one long revolution. It's all part of the same moment. There are different aspects, but yeah, so that works well. Mary Jones for the second essay question regarding communism and fascism. Can I use the NEP and the 25 points as my primary sources? Sure. Yeah, let me just say a word about primary sources also. Again, for the essay questions and for the third part, where you're expected to know primary sources, I'm not expecting you, under no circumstances, I'm not expecting you guys to quote verbatim from the sources. I'm not expecting you I'm expecting you to know the ideas of the sources and what the sources say and what the sources call for. I don't expect you to quote them. I don't expect you to know all of them in their totality. And so that's, I think that's, you need to know that as you go forward. I think in the third part, I may give you a primary source which we read, which we saw together. In terms of the DBQ section in the A-level exam, all 3 sources are sources that we read in class, that we saw in class, that we discussed in class. The H class, you have 3 new sources. You have 2 sources that we already talked about. And so in H, you have 3 new sources that we have not seen, that we did not talk about, that you are expected to analyze. Okay. All right. Okay. Let's see. A lot of questions coming in. Okay. The Schleifen plan. The Schleifen plan was the plan that Germany had in World War I to defeat France in quick succession, and they were going to the goal for Germany in any war against France and Russia was to defeat France within 42 days so that it can go and then push its army to the Eastern Front and defeat Russia. But in the First World War, the Schleifen plan fails. Okay.
Jack, do we need to know all the laws restricting Jewish rights in Germany, or is that these laws leading up to the peak of the Holocaust? So again, obviously, in all of the classes we talked about the different laws that were put into place by the German government, by Nazi Germany, beginning in 1933. No, I don't expect you to know all of the laws. Obviously, there are some really important ones, such as the Nuremberg laws. You do need to know what the Nuremberg laws were, what they had to say. You need to know again basic ideas of what Germany was restricting during the course of the 1930s. Do I expect you to remember the date in which all of the laws were passed and the title of each of the laws? No, but during the course of the 1930s, you should be able to tell me that Nazi Germany passed laws restricting Jewish social life. Jews were not permitted. This is particularly after 1938. This was after Kristallnacht. They weren't permitted to go out to the movies. They weren't permitted to go out to concerts, to shows, etc. Jews were prohibited from being in schools. They were prohibited from shechita. So these are those were the basic aspects. But no, I'm not. You don't need to tell me this law was passed in the summer of 1933, and this was passed in the spring of 1937. I don't expect you to be able to remember that. I can't remember that stuff anyway. So, okay. Shai, is there any relationship between the way Hitler, Lenin, and Stalin rose to power? That's an interesting question. Maybe that question will appear on the exam. That's interesting. Okay. More questions. I'm trying to look for sort of broader questions that have that incorporate a lot of the more specific questions that you guys asked. Do we need to know the Joseph Chamberlain document from Nate? Yes, that's a good document to know. It goes back to the issue of imperialism. Is imperialism good? Is it bad? Who was it good for? Those are, that's an important document to know. Blah, blah, blah. Molly, what political changes happened after World War I? So that's a good question. So there are a number of political changes after World War I during the interwar period. You can talk about Russia. You can talk about Germany. Germany goes from being a monarchy to a republic. Remember the Weimar Republic. You can talk about Italy. Italy goes through a period of experiencing the rise of Mussolini and fascism. And then Germany again itself, beginning in the early 1930s, undergoes another revolution, or political revolution of sorts, with the rise of Nazi Germany and the Nazi Party. Okay. From Zach, for the documents that we have seen before in the DBQ section, do we need to know the stuff we discussed about them in class? We asked the questions of the document that required knowledge. So again, let me be clear about the DBQ section. The questions in the DBQ, the questions after every source in the DBQ section. So again, in A, you have 3 sources, in H, you have 5. The question that appears after every source relates specifically to the document that you just read, asking you to analyze the document. It's asking you to interpret the document. It's asking you to read the document and offer the analysis of the document itself. It does not ask you to bring into the answer class discussion. It asks you to answer the question about the specific documents. Now, again, remember, after the documents, you have another piece. For the A class, you have a writing prompt where you're asked to write a thesis statement in response to the writing prompt. for the H class, you have, again, a writing prompt where you're asked to compose a thesis and a body paragraph in which you use a number of the documents to sustain your analysis, your thesis. And that does require some additional knowledge that we had from class. But the questions after the text themselves are not part of the, do not really, the focus of them really is the source itself. And the sources that again, the new sources for the H class are very readable. One of them, again, is a chart, which is very, I think, simple to interpret. The other two sources, I think, are very straightforward. You should have a fairly, I think, I'm not going to say easy, but I think you should be able to interpret them without much trouble. Okay, good. Let's get to more questions. Okay. If you sweat in a sweater, do you become the sweater? Wow, Brian, these are some great questions. These are the kinds of questions I really should be asking on the exam. Great question. Okay. Okay. Blah, blah, blah. Let's look at some more questions here. Practical synthetic Zionism. So what are the differences between the two? Or I guess what is the... So practical Zionism's main focus was trying to move people, trying to take people from Jews from Russia, primarily from Russia, other parts of Eastern Europe, move them to the land of Israel, give them the tools, the know-how to be able to work the lands, to be able to actually sustain themselves in the land of Israel. The point of practical Zionism was very simple, and this is where practical Zionism diverges from political Zionism. Practical Zionists believe that in order to actually create a homeland for the Jews, you need people there. You need Jews there to actually create that home. You can get all of the international support you want. You can get all of the international recognition you want, like Herzl was trying to do. But if you don't have people there, if you don't have people living there, if you don't have people building communities, if you don't have people building up the infrastructure, if you don't have people actually living there, it doesn't really mean anything. And so practical Zionism saw, first and foremost, in order to have a Jewish homeland, you need to have people in that home. So comes along. So the synthetic Zionism, as we talked about, really combines both approaches. Synthetic Zionism says, yes, we recognize that you need people in the land. At the same time, you also need to gain international recognition. And so Herzl's role was still super important, and that's what Chaim Weizmann takes up. Chaim Weizmann takes up the goal of combining the two into into a single Zionist effort. Okay. Let's go through some more questions now. Blah, blah, blah. Can you explain the difference between Marxists and Bolsheviks? Same thing. Okay. Blah, blah, blah. Let's see. Let's look up here. A couple of questions from Morgan. The French were worried about the Jews not being loyal to the French. Couldn't one ask the French the same thing? If they would choose their Roman Catholicism over their country, they didn't know if they would put their religion before their country. So this has to do with, again, Jewish emancipation. Remember, Jews were always the outsiders. And so the point as to whether Frenchmen would choose their religion wasn't really a question, because it was being Roman Catholic was really... Being a Roman Catholic was basically being French. or being a Christian was basically being French. Christian values were what sustained the French monarchy. Jews were seen as outsiders. They were seen as different. And so because they were seen as different, their loyalties were questioned. Now, after the French Revolution, when monarchy goes away, when the relationship with the church changes, there was a real renewed sense that citizenship should extend to all man. All men are created, to quote from the Declaration of Independence, all men are created equal. And that ideal comes from, again, it comes from the Enlightenment thinkers, but it very much is part of the French Revolution mentality that everyone deserves rights. Now, despite that fact, there was opposition amongst during the French Revolution to giving Jews complete and full emancipation. At the end of the day, though, in 1792, they were given complete and total emancipation. Okay. Should we be going through every single document from the second semester? You should be going through the sources from the second semester. There aren't that many. I think maybe 250. I think from the second semester. Every single source. No, I'm kidding. I think there were fewer than 40 sources altogether from the second semester. Okay, more questions. Morgan, don't panic. Everything is going to be okay. Thank you, Lisa. I know I'm funny. Everything's going to be okay, guys. I know you guys are stressed. I know you guys are worried. Everything is going to be okay. Remember, we're not here. I'm not here to trick you guys. You guys are there to. I'm here to make sure you guys succeed. Okay, that's why I'm here. That's why I'm here. Okay. Okay. Let's look at more stuff. More questions. Ooh, I'm gonna have to do coffee fill up soon. Okay. More questions. Zach Gold, what were the causes of World War II? That's a good question. There are a lot of different things you can look at as the causes of World War II. I think, you know, one of the major causes of World War II was the First World War and the outcome of the First World War. That's an important thing to think about, and sort of the geopolitical discussions, negotiations that were held during the course of the of the 1930s. So all of that plays a role. But when you look at the causes of the Second World War, you have to look at sort of the First World War and what that actually did. Okay, what type of government was the Weimar Republic? The Weimar Republic was the German government that's put into place following the First World War. The Weimar Republic was a republican form of government. It was, at the time, one of the more forward-thinking kinds of governments that existed in the world at that point. There was universal suffrage. Men and women were given the rights to vote. There was an elected legislative body. There was an elected president. So it was a democratic form of government that that existed. Okay. Whew. Allergies this season are really bad. Okay, let's see more questions. More questions. Ooh, 8:15. We're getting close to game 3, guys. Getting close to game 3. A question from Ariella. For the DBQ, does each have their own prompt, or is it a combined question? No. In the DBQ section, after the documents, there is a writing prompt that takes into account all of the documents. Okay, so it's all of the documents. Okay, question from Molly. Difference between the functionalists and intentionalists. This is something that we have gone over a lot of times. This is something which really defined our discussion of the Holocaust, and something that I think as we went through the Holocaust material, this was the lens through which we saw it. So the basic arguments, and again, in the different classes, we looked at different sources, first to explain the intentionalist and functionalist point of view. But for the intentionalists, the basic elements of the intentionalist point of view is that there was an intention by Hitler to murder the Jews of Europe, and that there was a specific plan that Hitler had in order to carry out this act, and that the final solution itself is something of a creation of Hitler. Okay, that's the intentionalist point of view. And then we have the functionalist point of view, which makes the argument that no, the final solution was not the creation of Hitler per se. Rather, it came from the German bureaucracy, that for various reasons, you have German members of the German bureaucracy, the German government, not lowest level ranking members, but lower level ranking members of the German bureaucracy, actually crafting and creating this policy that was eventually adopted by the higher ups, but there was no order to do this from Hitler himself. Now, again, when we talked about in the A-level class, we talked about sort of the ultra-intentionalist and ultra-functionalist points of views, which sort of are fringe opinions, and most people, most scholars, historians, take a look or fall somewhere in the middle. In the H class, we read through a secondary source, which went into some fairly specific detail as to how the intentionalists and functionalists argued what they did. The intentionalists, looking at various sources from Hitler himself, looking at various speeches from Hitler himself, as well as referencing what other high-ranking Nazis said. And to be sure, the last primary source, and again, this was specific in the H class, the last primary source that we looked at together as a class, from Rudolf Hess, who was the commandant of Auschwitz, the head of Auschwitz. He says, and again, he says that the orders for the final solution came from Hitler himself. Now, remember, again, this is part of the discussion when we talked about this came from him writing after the fact, writing while he was in prison awaiting trial. But he talks about that these orders came from Hitler. The functionalist arguments are that we don't have any evidence that Hitler himself gave this order. There's evidence showing that the ideas sort of came from, or the nature of the Nazi government did not lend itself to Hitler and others actually issuing these orders and carrying out. And yeah, so that's the again, the evidence from the functionalist point of view was the nature of the Nazi governments could not have carried out this kind of or was not in a position to carry out this kind of order. There were, within the bureaucracy, there were Nazis who had vitriolic anti-Semitism and hated Jews and wanted to carry out these kinds of orders out. You have the orders that are given to the Einsatzgruppen to carry out their attacks against the enemies of the Jews or the enemies of the Nazis in the Soviet Union during the summer of 1941. And then again, from the functionalist perspective, there's from the functionalist perspective, Hitler and the other high-ranking officers of the Nazi governments were not in a while they held high office, the way that the structure of the government itself did not really allow them to give these kinds of orders. And while they were respected for these positions, their orders to these ends could not have been carried out. So those are sort of some of the arguments used according to the functionalist and intentionalist perspectives. Let's see. Ooh. Why is Jason Aronoff on this? He's not involved in this. I think we should just block him for the evening. I don't think he needs to be part of this discussion. Kidding, just kidding. Okay. Okay. Can you go over the whole situation with Alfred Dreyfus? Okay. Yeah. Before I go over Dreyfus, just one. I saw a thing I just saw one thing from Sam. Is the Einstein? It's not Einstein. The Einsatzgruppen. A good proof of the intentionalist perspective. Again, the Einsatzgruppen. You can take it. You can interpret it in a couple of ways. With the Einsatzgruppen, you have mobile killing units that are going out and murdering the enemies of the Jews. And so, yes, clearly there's a sense that the Jews need to be murdered, but we don't know where their orders are coming from. Now, there are many historians who say the orders of the Einsatzgruppen can't necessarily be traced up to Hitler himself. They can be traced to other segments of the German bureaucracy. So that would support the functionalist perspective. On the other hand, you have before January of 1942 a very clear purpose of the Einsatzgruppen in killing and going out and murdering Jews. The question. And this is where the question always leads in the intentionalist and functionalist perspective. Where do these orders come from, and what are the reasons why, and what are the reasons that they're doing this? Okay, okay. Let's move on. So a couple of questions about the Nuremberg laws. So again, the Nuremberg laws are key. Passed in September of 1935. They do really a couple of things. First is it undoes the entirety of the emancipation process for the Jews. The Jews are no longer considered to be German citizens. They are stateless. They are stateless, and they are no longer part of the German nation. They're no longer citizens. They don't have rights of German citizens. They don't have rights as German citizens, and so they are giving up their status in Germany itself. So the Jews are no longer considered to be German, part of the German people. Now that has repercussions because that means that they can be treated differently, and so they can be treated differently. They can be legislated against even harsher, and so there are additional laws put into place. They can be persecuted and prosecuted to an even greater degree following 1935. You also have the laws prohibiting marriage between Jews and Germans, and any sexual contact between Jews and Germans. The Nuremberg laws exist to remove Jews from the social and legal dynamic of Germany, and to make and this is part of these are the racial purity laws, to make the German race, in the eyes of the Nazis, a more pure race, by removing what Hitler would call the scoundrel Jews from the equation. And so remember, there's no question that Hitler was a virulent anti-Semite, that he hated Jews in every way, shape, or form. Again, there's no question about that. You look at his writings. You go back and you look at Mein Kampf, excuse me. There's no question that Hitler hates Jews for a variety of reasons. And again, this goes back to the intentionalist functionalist point of view. So when you look at what Hitler says, right, you look at Hitler in Mein Kampf, he hates Jews. He hates the Jews because, again, their physical appearance. He hates Jews because of what they've done with taking over the economy and taking over the media, taking over social and cultural life. He hates them. He absolutely hates Jews. Does that mean he wants to then go out and does he hatch a plan then to actually murder all of the Jews of Europe? It's unclear. But you look at you look at his other speeches, and he rails against them, even in the speeches where he's saying, Jews, you should be leaving Germany. He goes off against them over and over and over and over again. So there's no question that he hates the Jews. But the question that the intentionalist and functionalist perspective asks, again, this gets to we acknowledge this. We acknowledge that this is the case, but where does that lead us to? Does that lead us to actual orders to commit mass murder, mass genocide? And that's where the intentionalist and functionalist debate comes into question. There's evidence on both sides. Again, most historians won't take one of the more radical approaches. Most historians adopt a middle approach, whatever that middle approach could be. Again, tending either to the intentionalist or tending either to the functionalist perspective. All right. Do we need to know the people involved in Jewish emancipation, like Mendelssohn, Serf Baer, Wilhelm von Daum? Yes, you do need to know that. You do need to know that. Okay, let's go back to some other questions, some earlier questions. How did Mussolini rise to power? What was his beliefs? What was the connection, similarity to Hitler? Again, Mussolini is part of the, or becomes the leader of the fascist movement in Italy at the very end of the First World War, beginning of the 1920s. Remember, Italy during the First World War is sort of convinced by Britain and France to move over to their side during the course of the First World War. They are given promises that they are to, if they come out to support Britain and France, they're given promises that they're going to be given land, they're going to be well compensated following the First World War. And Italy goes to the Treaty of Versailles thinking that that's what's going to happen, thinking that they're going to actually get a whole lot of stuff after the First World War, and they don't. And so there was a lot of resentment in Italy following the First World War, and this leads to political upheavals in Italy. It allows the fascist party to take control. So fascism believes in a couple of things. They're anti-democratic. Fascism is does not believe in democracy. They don't believe in the legislative process. They're anti-Semitic. Mussolini, the fascists themselves in Italian elections in the early 1920s actually do very poorly. But Mussolini sort of forces the hand by holding famously the March on Rome. The king of Italy becomes nervous that the fascists are going to lead a popular uprising. Mussolini is offered the position of prime minister, and then he's given the chance for a year to rule by decree, basically to rule by himself. And he does this. And what he does in essence is he changes the voting laws in Italy so that the political party that gets more than 25%, or the highest of those parties that get more than 25%, control automatically more than 2/3 of the seats in the Italian parliament, and that's what's put into place. And that's how Mussolini and the fascists come to power And from that point on, Mussolini rules through basically decree because he controls everything. We didn't really get into the economics of fascism, which is another area that fascism is really defined by itself, defines itself. So we're not going to get into this. I promised before that we're going to go back to the Dreyfus affair. Backgrounds, Nathaniel or Olivia, Lisa, what does that mean? Okay, so right, so the Dreyfus affair, the Alfred Dreyfus was a French Jew. He was a member of the French army. He was falsely accused of spying for Germany. He was falsely accused of passing information that was important to the French military, to the German government, which was the enemy of France during the course of the late 19th century. What was clear was that, first of all, the person identifying Dreyfus's handwriting was not a handwriting expert. He really didn't know anything. And what was further certain was Dreyfus was put on trial. He was found guilty. He was sent to prison. Specifically, he was sent to Devil's Island, which was a prison island in the South Atlantic. What was clear, though, is that as evidence came to light, and what's interesting is that the evidence that came to light through the work of someone who himself was avowedly an anti-Semite. During the course of the 1890s, there was 1880s, there was a new head of French intelligence who went through the Dreyfus case and found that the evidence there was not really support the guilt of Dreyfus, and so he brought this new information to light. What was clear, though, was that the army establishment in France refused to admit its mistakes, specifically concerning a Jew. And so, despite that fact, Dreyfus's family worked very hard to push for a new trial. The Dreyfus affair really rocked France, as it was known, because you had those who supported Dreyfus, you had those who did not support and rejected Dreyfus and rejected the possibility of giving him another chance. Famously, Emile Zola, the journalist, wrote his article J'accuse, where he publicly accused the French military establishment of anti-Semitism. Eventually, Dreyfus was given a second trial. He was found guilty at that second trial. Eventually, his sentence was he was pardoned for his crimes, and so he was able to get his life back. And again, what's fascinating with Dreyfus is that he remained a committed and loyal Frenchman. During the First World War, he volunteered to serve in the French army, despite the fact that the French government, the French army, and large segments of the French population turned their back on him. He remained a loyal Frenchman. Okay. Okay, good. Let's see. More questions here. How many points do you think Steph is going to drop tonight? It's a good question. Game 3, it's a big game. LeBron's gonna have a big game tonight. The question is whether anyone else in the Cavs is going to be able to help him out there. Kevin Love's going to have a big game. There's going to have to be a couple of other guys. JR is going to not have to be so. He just has to make smart plays. They need a lot of help. I don't know, with the Warriors, they just have too much firepower. So I could see I could see the Cavs stealing one here. Um, I can see them. Winning this game out. I can see the Warriors just after 2 games at home sort of be a little bit drained. But I think Golden State's gonna win out tonight. I don't think it's gonna be. I think there's just too much. I think Durant after the first game is locked in. I think that he played a pretty poor game one, and especially on that missed free throw by George Hill when JR got that rebound. That was his fault. He should have boxed him out. So he should, he had a bad game one. He had a good game two. He was pretty efficient. Durant was pretty efficient in game two. I think he was like 10 of 14 or something like that, 11 or 14 from the field. He was really efficient, but the crazy thing is that he can be better. And that's the scary thing. Even Steph was, game two, he hit a bunch of crazy shots, but he wasn't efficient at all. Steph, he was like 11 of 20 something from the field. So both those guys can do a lot better, and I feel like that's coming in this game. I think Durant's gonna have a big game. I think Steph's gonna have a big game. So yeah, I think the Warriors are gonna win out tonight. Okay. Are Renkowski and Chernik how important for the test? No, they're not. We talked about them in the context of the ghettos. Did we ever decide on a definition of the Holocaust? No, we didn't. I mean, I offered my definition of the Holocaust, but I think there are a lot of in both classes, we saw a lot of different definitions of the Holocaust. There are a lot of different ways that you can define the Holocaust, whether you want to define the Holocaust as starting in 1939, as starting in 1942, as starting in 1935, who are the major subjects associated, whether it's the Jews and everybody else, whether the Jews are made part of the other groups that were, affected by the Holocaust. There are a lot of different definitions that you can take with the Holocaust, and as long as if on the test I ask you to provide a definition, as long as you justify it, as long as you tell me, look, these are the reasons why, you have to justify it. You can't tell me that the Holocaust started in 1965, but as long as you can make a reasonable argument for it, then there's a lot to say there. Okay, let's get back to some of the questions. How did communism rise in Russia? From Evan. I spent a while going through the Russian Revolution earlier, so you can go see that. Is communism anti-Semitic in its definition, like fascism is? From Mary, no, it's not. Fascism is avowedly anti-Semitic, in that fascism believes and puts tremendous emphasis on the nation itself, on the people themselves. This is something that Mussolini puts focus on, where he talks about the Italian people, the Italian race is what's supreme. Hitler and Nazism does the same thing, and Nazism is a form of fascism. Obviously, the German race is what drives Hitler and the others in the context of Germany. Communism is an economic model, right? Communism believes that it's up to government to control the economy, and that government has that role, that responsibility. It's not about the people as being inherently better. It's about that the people should have power. And so communism at its core is an economic model. Remember, and just thinking about this in the more modern connotations, you look at communism in the world today. What countries are communist today? Well, you have China was a communist nation. It's slowly making the changeover from communism not to democracy, but it's slowly changing from communism to a different economic, to a free market economic enterprise, to what we call capitalism. That's what China is doing today. In Cuba, you have a very similar model where again, it's a communist nation, but communism is based on is really the economic model where that's the key. Okay. Okay, good. Let's look at some more questions. Shia, did anti-Semitism play any role in the Holocaust? Yeah, a bit. I think it did. Sure. Yeah, in answering that question, yeah, I think it did just a little bit. Obviously, in being facetious, but it definitely played. It definitely played a role. Okay. All right. Let's see more questions. All right. 20 minutes to the game. Okay. Okay. From Eliza. I don't have access to Joseph Chamberlain. I don't have access to Cavour. If you don't have access to it, try and make sure you're logged into your Frisch email account. If not, just ask for access and I'll give it to you. Shayna, how can Hess's account prove both the functionalist and intentionalist argument? You're right. So Shayna, this goes back to sort of the last thing we talked about with Hess's account. Hess says both things in his sort of memoir that he writes. He says that he talks about the order may have come from Hitler, but even if it didn't, we would have taken it like it did from Hitler. And then he says, no, the order actually came from Hitler. He goes back and forth. So he says both sides, but that's the point, meaning, did it come from Hitler or didn't it come from Hitler? You can say, yes, it did come from Hitler, and you can say, no, it didn't come from Hitler. But I think his what he's writing really represents the dynamic of the intentionalist and functionalist point of view. Okay. From Zach, should we read the sources inside, or do we have to know what we said about them? Again, I think reading them will help you think about them. You should know what we said about them, and you should know how we analyze them. Again, I'm not in the third section of the test. I'm not saying in this sentence, what did this author mean, or please quote this, or please quote a line from. I'm asking you the meaning of the source, and so yes, if you can go over your notes and you can go over the meaning of the sources, and that's fine. I think looking at the source itself will help you analyze and understand. Okay. Okay. Let's look at more questions here. Can I give you hints for which sources you're going to pick? I could, but that wouldn't make it fun then for you guys. So no, this is all to make it fun for you guys. So yeah. Let's see. All right. So there are a couple of questions about the Great Depression and its association with the rest of the world. I think Isaac and Mary, both of you asked this question. So remember, in the United States, the stock market collapses in October of 1929. Fine. So why would this have an effect? Why would this have a worldwide global effect? So for a couple of reasons. Remember, we talked about the Dawes Plan. The Dawes Plan was put into place in the early 1920s to help Germany with getting out of the economic tailspin that it was, particularly when it came to helping them pay for reparations, when it helped to trying to help Germany get out of the economic tailspin that it found itself in, was put into place in 1924. Remember, Germany was unable to pay its reparations. That's why France and Belgium basically invade Germany and take the material, and instead of taking money, they take the raw materials for themselves. So the United States creates the Dawes Plan, which is there to help Germany. It pumps money into Germany. It supports Germany. It gives sort of indication to the rest of the world, hey, we, the United States, we're going to be supporting Germany. You should too. And so there's the economy of the United States is tied into the economy of Germany. And as a result of the United States pumping money into Germany, this has positive effects for the German economy itself. And so it's really important. Now, when the stock market crashes, that means that the United States, and again, that has profound effects in the United States. Banks are failing. Remember, people are borrowing huge amounts of money from banks in order to invest in the stock market. When the stock market crashes, that money goes away. People don't have the ability to pay banks. Banks fail. When banks failed in 1929, people who put money into the bank, deposited their money in the bank, that money went away. They didn't have access to that anymore. The fundamentals of the U.S. economy failed, and so that had an effect on the U.S. being able to support Germany. Remember, the United States stops payments to Germany, stops giving money to Germany in 1930. Other banks, which were invested in the U.S. stock market, begin to fail, and so banks, specifically in Central Europe, which had been supporting governments in Central Europe, and again, this bank is an indication of just the international sense of the banking industry in the 1920s. These banks fail in Central Europe because of their connection with the U.S. stock market and the U.S. economy. They're not they lose money because of, again, they're invested in the stock market. They can't help and continue to support governments in Central Europe. The United States basically removes itself from supporting Germany, and so Germany again goes into a tailspin. The governments throughout the world go into a tailspin, and so that is the major effect. Okay, there's a huge source of 19th century Jewish history. It's like 30 pages, so I have to read that. No, I think that has to do with, that was the I think we had a project in class. Elisa, this is I'm referencing your question. We had a project in class where you were all to read different documents about different experiences of Jews. Those are not on the test. Okay. Okay. Let's keep going. What's my thesis about Zionism? My thesis about Zionism is that, very simply, irrespective of the Holocaust, the state of Israel would have been created following the state of Israel would have been created at some point, even without the Holocaust. Again, the thesis stems from the arguments that the Holocaust was sort of the cause for the creation of the state of Israel, and that because of the Holocaust and because the rest of the world felt bad, or because they felt that they needed to give something back to the Jews, or because they felt like the Jews needed a homeland to protect themselves, the state of Israel was created. And again, my arguments were the following. If you adopt that approach, it de-emphasizes the work that Zionism and Zionists played from the late 19th century all the way through the 1930s and 1940s in actually creating the state itself. It sort of pushes aside all of the the recognition that the international community gives for the creation of a Jewish homeland going back into the 19-teens. And it also lends itself to supporting the position that many Arab countries, including the Palestinian governments or the Palestinian representatives, argue for, that the state of Israel only exists as a result of the Holocaust, and that the Jews don't have any real claim to the land itself, except for the fact that they got this because the international community felt bad. Now, we saw in many documents, and we didn't get there with the we got there with the H actually also, but we saw that already in the British Mandate and in the Churchill White Paper. There's a recognition by the international community that no, there is an inherent historical connection between Jews, Judaism, and the land of Israel, and so that's that's something that the international community recognizes, and a key component in why and how a Jewish state was created. Okay. Can I explain the Mensheviks versus Bolsheviks versus Marxists? We did that before when we talked about the long Russian Revolution discussion. Again, Bolsheviks and Marxists are the same thing. Mensheviks again, the Mensheviks are reformers who want to bring political change in Russia, but they're not as radical as the Bolsheviks. Is Winston Churchill white paper included on the test? Not for the honors class, for the A-level class, I believe it is. Okay. Let's see. Shayna, do we have to know the specifics about the crimes of the Nazis or just what they were charged for? Meaning you do have to know that there are differences in what was in the Nuremberg trials between sort of the war crimes, the crimes against the civilians, and the crimes against humanity. The different gradations that they were charged for conspiring and for planning the war, carrying out the war. They were tried and put on trial for carrying out offenses against civilians and then against people based on their religious. So, yeah, exactly. Good. Okay. Excellent. All right, let's keep going. We're getting 8:52. A couple minutes to the game. Running low on coffee, guys. My caffeine intake is getting low. That's not good. We have to change that soon. We'll get some more in a little bit. We'll put a temporary pause on this. We'll just don't worry. I have more coffee made. I made a couple more shots of espresso. So it's all good. It's all good. Let's see here. Open. Oh, I see this. Okay, good. All right, let's look at more questions here. Guys, I'm really, I'm happy to go on for longer than this. I cleared my schedule for the night. And by the way, anyone coming to graduation tomorrow, we could do a review at graduation if you want to. We can sort of sit in the back, and while everyone is getting their diplomas, we could do a review. So I'll be there if you guys want to do that. APUS Gov, Rabbi Zadoff from Mr. Zadoff. That's good, Elisa. Yeah. AP Gov, new teacher next year. Sammy, yeah, you're going to be there. Kayla, I assume Marguerite also will come and do that with us too. Shayna, yeah, absolutely. All right, a bunch of you guys will be at graduation, so we can do a review. Maybe we'll live stream the review at graduation. How about we do that? Instead of actually live streaming the graduation, we'll live stream the review at the graduation. I think that's a good idea. All right. Let's see, more questions here. Okay, so this is from Sammy. How did the 1939 white paper reject the Peel Commission? We didn't get to this in the H class, so this is for the A classes. Remember, the Peel Commission is the first attempts by the British government at creating a partition for Palestine. The Peel Commission creates two distinct countries in Palestine, a home for the Jews, a home for the Arabs. And the Peel Commission basically said, look, we're seeking to understand why do Jews and Arabs not like each other? Why do they hate each other? And they basically said, well, you look at them and they are basically different in every way, shape, or form. They have a different language, they have a different background, they have a different history. The Peel Commission said that Arabs are more, quote, Asiatic in nature, meaning they're closer to their background is in the Middle East and closer to an Asian background, while the Jews are European in nature. They have different customs, they have different backgrounds. And they said because of this, it's simply impossible to create any sort of unified government. And so And so that's what the Peel Commission said. Let's create two separate nations, two separate countries. And the 1939 white paper said no. The 1939 white paper rejected this possibility, and they said no. We're going to insist on creating a single unified country where Jews and Arabs live together. They have a single government. They have a single. They're supposed to work together. Oh, and by the way, in addition to this, because we're so concerned that Jews are going to overtake the governments, we're going to limit Jewish immigration to Palestine to 75,000 people over the course of 5 years, which severely limits the number of Jews allowed to come into the Palestine. Now, does this, reject the does this reject the tone, the tenor, the message, the ideal of the Balfour Declaration? No, not really, because at the end of the day, it's establishing a homeland for the Jews in Palestine. Yes, it's being circumscribed, but at the end of the day, that's what it's creating. Again, that's how you could interpret that white paper. So, that's interesting. It's a possibility. No, and so again, that was for the H classes. We did not get there to the white paper, so that is not on the exam. Okay. All right. Ooh, a couple minutes to game time. This is exciting, guys. I'm gonna put the game on, have it in the background. Fun stuff. Yeah. Provide commentary on it as it's going on. Okay. Other questions that are coming up here. Yeah, Aliza. Yeah, we did a project in class about Jewish emancipation. Different groups read different sources, so no, I'm not. I don't believe there's a question on the exam about that. So yeah, you don't have to worry about that. Okay. Good. All right. Let's see. What else? Yeah. More questions. I'm surprised that students from other classes are not on this live stream, or maybe they are. I don't know. Maybe they are, and you guys just aren't asking any questions. But thank goodness the seniors aren't here. Wow. I mean, I really do hope that the night before graduation they have something better to do than to hang out on a live stream for a 10th grade final. But you never know. They may not. So, but anyway. All right. Let's see. More questions. More questions here. Okay. So there again. This is so Shane is asking this question. There are a couple of questions also about reading the textbook. I think reading the textbook can be helpful in that it provides sort of a context for you guys to understand everything. The textbook, in terms of providing a lot of information, it doesn't provide a huge amount of information, but it sort of puts it into a fairly straightforward way of understanding it, and it gives you that narrative. So from that sense, it's helpful to read it. But remember, I'm not asking you to just give me facts and figures. Those aren't the kinds of questions you're being asked. You're being asked to make connections. You're being asked to make arguments. You're being asked to interpret, which means you need to know some facts, which means you need to know some things, and you need to be able to tell me sort of what events are. But I'm not gonna, you don't need to relate the entire narrative to me. That's the point. Wow, the Yankees are 0-0 with Toronto in the top of the 8th. Unbelievable. Okay. Let's see. Wow, Yankees are 0-0. That's unbelievable. All right, on to the final stuff. Okay. So in terms of the textbook, I think that's the answer. That's the answer with the textbook. Okay. All right. I'm just going to pause this for a minute, guys. I'm just going to turn the camera off for a minute so I can get some more coffee. Okay. I'm not going anywhere. I'm just getting a little more coffee. So I'll be back in a second. I'm just turning the camera off for a minute, and I'll be back. All right, guys, we are back. There we go. Okay, hey, we're back. Yay. Okay, great. Sorry. Oh, okay. Let's see. All right, just doing a couple of things here. There we go. All right. Hey guys, okay, we're back. Okay. Did we read the Nuremberg Laws in class? We did read the Nuremberg Laws in class. The Nuremberg Laws were read in both classes. Okay. All right, let's look more. Other questions. Can you explain Dunkirk and how it helped the Germans? Dunkirk was it didn't help the Germans. It was just a point in time when the Germans were able to show their military might in a very real way. If you guys saw the movie, you would know Dunkirk was sort of the British last stand in the spring of 1940, where 450,000 or about 400,000 British troops were basically pushed up against the sea on the beaches of Dunkirk, and the Germans were advancing towards them, and the British had a choice of either trying to fight the Germans or retreating back to Germany. And the decision was taken by the newly installed Prime Minister Winston Churchill to remove the troops and to retreat back to Britain, allowing them to fight another day. And that's what was key. And what that did for the Germans was it basically gave them full control of the European continent. They did not have any opposition at all after this point because the British were basically gone. Okay. Okay. She had to know the opinions of Walter LaCure, Obama, and you. Again, what they generally say. You don't need to know them verbatim. You don't need to, but you need to know generally what they say. Okay. Can we use the textbook? This is from Rachel from the second essay question. Sure. Yeah, you can. Absolutely. All right, more questions here. Oh, from Shearer, who's the Belgian Congo fight between? Oh, okay, so it goes back to imperialism. Remember, what happens in the Congo is that you have a couple of different elements. You have the King of Belgium, who makes deals with local leaders in the Congo in order to use their natural resources. Their natural resources specifically are the key natural resource is the rubber tree that provides the most for Belgium, and so the King of Belgium makes local deals with the Belgian tribes, and basically doesn't live up to them, and sends his own personal army to ensure that that Belgium is able to extract the sap from the rubber tree. And when the local tribal leaders in Belgium refuse to acknowledge or to allow them to take and harvest the sap from the rubber tree, the army of the King of Belgium basically just mutilated and killed hundreds of thousands of Congolese of people. Eventually, the Parliament of Belgium took over this situation and stopped the king from doing this. And that really led to the Berlin Conference or Congress, where the various rules were put into place as to how imperialism can actually be done by these countries, and that the the key thing is that European countries could not just simply claim a land in Africa as their own. They have to actually either establish a government there. They actually have to have a presence there. They can't just run up a flag and say this land is ours. They actually have to have a presence there and actually be there. Okay? Good. Okay. By the way, more coffee. Good stuff. It's getting ready for the game, guys. Fun stuff. Fun stuff. Okay, good. More questions. Will you ask us to compare ideas through what we learned in the second semester? Yeah, sure, absolutely. Yeah, we will. Oh, thanks, Shana. You're welcome. Okay. Yeah, of course you will. Who are the Blitz? The Blitz isn't anybody. The Blitz is the the attack by the German Air Force against Britain beginning in the summer of 1940, lasting until 1941. Giant mind map instead of DBQ. I would love to. It's a great idea. Fantastic idea. Okay. Kayla Seidel, what don't we need to know? You don't need to know first semester stuff. So there you go. You just do that. Blah, blah, blah. Can I provide a few definitions of the Holocaust, please? This is from Zach Gold. So again, you can think about this in terms of a couple of different ways of defining the Holocaust. You can think of that. You can think about it. And again, I'm not ascribing any specific definitions to any specific institution. And we did do that, and each of the classes did that in their own different ways. But you can look at it from a variety of vantage points. You can say, you can look at it from a chronological point of view, and you can take a more expansive view that the Holocaust begins when Hitler comes to power in 1933, because at that point Hitler begins to legislate laws against Jews, begins to pass laws against Jews, and so you can say that the Holocaust starts at that point. You can say that the Holocaust starts after 1938 with Kristallnacht, right? November 1938, where for the first time the Nazis not only attack the Jewish community, but they do it in a sustained way, and they do it in a purposeful way. You can say that the Holocaust begins in 1939 when the war actually begins, because that's when the Germans are actually involved, engaged in a military conflict. And you can say that the Holocaust begins in the summer of 1941 with the Einstein group, or again, if you want to take a a minimalist point of view, you say that it starts in 1942, January of 1942, when the final solution is actually put into place. You can say it that way. You can also, view it from the perspective of who was the major focus, who was affected by the Holocaust. Clearly, there's no question, Jews were the majority of the people who were killed, who were murdered during the course of the Holocaust. But does that mean that Jews were the primary subject? And there's some definitions that say Jews were the primary subject, and there were others. Whether we're talking about gays and lesbians, whether we're talking about people of different religion, whether we're talking about the Roma population, there are different populations. The Jews were the major focus, and there are other populations. Or you could say no, that the Jews were part of these different groups. Again, those are sort of the variety of how you can play it here, and the variety of how you could say of defining what the Holocaust was. Game started. Okay. That's Cleveland's MO. Cleveland's MO is getting Kevin Love off to a quick start. It's what they always do. It's their thing. And then Golden State, you go to Draymond. That's what both of these teams know. That's what you do. Okay. Evan, I don't understand your last question. How the Jews reacted to Napoleon making the laws halachically set. Can you just, what do you mean by that? Can you just maybe clarify that a little bit, please? Thank you. Blah, blah, blah. Okay, let's look more. So we've been doing this now for an hour, almost an hour and a half. Almost an hour and 45 minutes, actually. Fun stuff. Okay, let's look at more questions here. I'm like 100 pages printed. I'm bugging out. Oh, I don't think you guys need to bug out. I think you guys need to relax. That's what you need to do. Okay. It would be great now if I just did this now at the end of if I just told you which documents would be in the DBQ. I should just do that at the very end of the live stream, right, guys? That would be fun. That'd be a good way to get people to watch towards the end, right? If I just told you, that'd be really funny. You can see how you guys react to that. That's great. This isn't a funny joke. Could have a raffle for the people at the end. What should we raffle off? That's a good idea. We should raffle off the DBQs. Is that what we're gonna do? Okay. There's actually a question that I wanted to get to. Why did Japan attack the U.S. at Pearl Harbor? Why would they want to involve America in the war? That comes from Akiva. So again, that really isn't our concern. That's something you'll talk more about next year. But there are a couple of reasons why. Japan saw the United States as unprepared for the war. They didn't see that they saw that the United States was not wanting to get involved, interested in getting involved, and they thought, in part, by attacking the United States in Pearl Harbor, that they can use that as a launching point to basically control the entire Pacific, which is what they wanted to do. And so, ooh, what a play by LeBron! Wow, that was good defense by McGee at first. Yeah, it was. What a play by him, though. Fast start. But that's what they were looking to do. Again, they were looking for to be able to become the sort of the power in the Pacific. They didn't and they saw that the United States really were not in a position to be able to defend themselves, because the United States had not gotten on a war effort. They were not on a path to creating a powerful military, and so they saw that and they understood that. And so that's in part why they attacked the United States. But again, Japan wants to become the imperial power. That's what they were looking to do. Cleveland's off to a fast start here, 12-4, 12-4 run. Cleveland just needs to, Golden State just needs to, they just need to keep up. That's all they need to do. Oh, good pass. They just need to keep up. That's the truth here. If they can weather this storm, then they'll be okay. Remember, this is all, basketball is a game of runs. That's what it is. Run after run. They just need to weather this storm. Okay. The political Zionists say that the homeland of Jews did not need to be Israel. So again, here there was a discussion of the possibility that perhaps the land of Israel did not need to be the homeland. They considered the Uganda proposal, which was the proposal that perhaps they could go to Uganda, create a homeland for themselves there. It was rejected though, because they did see the importance of the land of Israel, even though they did consider other possible alternatives. Okay. Oh, so Evan, you're talking about the Assembly of Jewish Notables, right? And since it's right, so yes, the Assembly of Jewish Notables sort of, remember, the Jews had a series of questions posed to them by Napoleon, and so they sort of, yes, they created white lies and saying, what a block. And then saying sort of, yes, creating white lies about Judaism for Napoleon, and they were codified as sort of halakhically acceptable answers in the French Sanhedrin. But they didn't have a choice. I mean, from the Jews' point of view, they didn't really have a choice at this point. And so, yes, while there were some Jews who were not particularly happy by this, they nevertheless accepted it, and they had to deal with it until the downfall of Napoleon. Okay. Is Orientalism acceptable of a movement starting during the 19th century that went into the next one? Sean, what do you mean by that? Can you further that? What do you mean by that? Honors questions are 5 out of 12 and 5 out of 5 DBQs. Yes, correct. Correct. And the DBQs and the documents that you will have are... No, I'm kidding. Not going to tell you guys. Or not just yet. Maybe. The DBQs are... Anyway. Okay, other questions. What are the DBQ sources? Yeah. Coffee's so good. Steph is not dropping 50 tonight. That's not going to happen. I'm being mean and making you even more stressed. Elisa, I'll pay you. No, that's not going to happen. No. Can I tell you one or all? No, I'm not going to tell you the DBQs, guys. All of the classes have DBQs. All of the 10th grade classes have DBQs. So it would be much appreciated. Thank you. Yes, I understand. I'm not going to tell you guys the DBQs. Okay, Shalom. So yeah, I don't think we really learned enough about Orientalism that to use it in the essay. I mean, we learned about imperialism, and you can talk about imperialism for the context of the essay, but you really can't talk about Orientalism. Okay. Can I tell you which essay question is on the final? No. I can't. I mean, I can, but I'm not going to. You guys have all day to study tomorrow. Yes, I understand you have other finals to study for. So, but yeah. Anyway, how much time should you allow for each section of the test? I think the essay should take you between. I think the essay should take you again between 20 and 30 minutes. I really want to emphasize. I really want to emphasize with the essay. Again, this is both for A and for H. I don't expect an exhaustive essay. I don't, and I can't. And so, you know, a 5 to 6 paragraph essay is what you should have. And so you don't need to. The essay doesn't need to be exhaustive. It needs to engage the essay question. It needs to detail the essay question, and it needs to provide an answer. But it doesn't need to be exhaustive. 5 to 6 paragraphs, including the introduction, including the conclusion. I think the DBQ section class is going to take you a lot shorter because you have just 3, and it's going to take you a shorter period of time. It's going to take you because you just have the 3 sources and the thesis statement. Again, the point of the DBQ is again, you're answering the question after each source, and you're putting it together to answer the writing prompt. Okay, and so for the H level class, it's going to take you a little bit longer because you do have to write the paragraph that supports it, and then you have 5 out of 12 in the short answer question. Again, in the short answer question, keep it to 3 to 4 sentences. You don't need to prove or show that you know everything about the answer. So that is, I think that is, it's important to keep that in mind. So please keep that in mind. Okay. Okay. If we don't get a DBQ, I'll take all 35 people off my review sheet. Ali, you're threatening me, which is fine. But I'm not gonna give in. So if Ali takes you off the review sheet, it's her fault, not mine. Okay, grammar and spelling. I'm not gonna don't worry about grammar and spelling. But you know, don't spell Hitler with a silent Q before you, you know, on the essay. Just, you know, try to be as mindful as possible. Thank you. What is the idea of the long 19th century? This is from Zach, and I mentioned it previously, but I can't find. I'm not asking for examples of it. Just to know, but this again, the focal point of the long 19th century is that the 19th century is not simply the chronological years of 1800s to 1899. The 19th century is, again, the 19th century starts earlier and ends later, and that the effects. Wow, Steve Kerr is mad. And the effects of he's going to get thrown out. We're going to get a technical. And that the effects of the 19th century are felt over the course of the 20th century, not just in the first couple of years of the 20th century, but for a very long portion of the 20th century. So that's something to that's what the long 19th century is that the 19th century is not just the chronological years 1800 to 1899, but it starts earlier, and that its effects ends much later. Ooh, Andre Iguodala, good to see Iggy back in the game. Okay, blah blah blah. Let's see. Look at more questions here. Are we required to write thesis on DBQ or just answer questions on each individual one? Both, right? Mitch, you have to answer a question after each document, and then write a thesis after all 3 documents in the A and 5 after the H. I'll make you brownies for DBQ. Thank you, Lisa, but no. Okay. Blah blah blah. How did imperialism, nationalism lead to World War I? So that's a good question, Evan. And that's something that we mentioned. It's something we discussed. So in thinking about in thinking about the imperialism and thinking about the nationalism, remember that the countries, in the context of leading up to the First World War, they're looking to gain every possible advantage. They're looking to show their superiority. They're looking to show that they can be a force to be reckoned with on the world, and so in leading up to the First World War, leading up to the First World War, you have countries that are militarizing. They're looking for colonies. Imperialism creates a sense of rivalry amongst European nations, a sense of mistrust, a sense of competition with each other. And so that's that's the way in which these countries see each other over the course of the 19th century, or the late 19th century, okay? Okay. The Nazis took over completely legally Russia. It was mostly overthrown governments. Yeah, correct. Remember, what's unique about the rise of the Nazis and the rise of fascists in Italy was that they gained power through legal means. The Russian Revolution was a revolution, right? It was an overthrow of the government. The Nazi government becomes the Nazi government through, oh, what a rebound by Durant. Oof. Through legal means. They get elected into office. And that was the same thing by the fascists. They take power. Yes, there was a march, and Mussolini sort of is given power, but he doesn't overthrow the government. He's given power by the king. All right. Let's see. Other questions here. What do you mean by right now? Mary bring choreographic babka to the final. Yeah. That's a maybe. We'll see. Babkas are not cheap. Okay. What year was the war of 1812? No, it was not an 1812, Brian. You should, look that up. I think it's important. Okay. Rachel, do we need to include primary sources in the video we learned as well, or is it just no? Meaning, I think you're going to need to use all of those kinds of sources because there's different information in those sources that you're going to use. So I think you're going to use as much of them as possible. Okay. More questions. Blah blah blah. There were 2 Boer Wars. Yes, there were 2 Boer Wars in South Africa, and Britain wins the second one, and basically exerts control over the entirety of South Africa as a result. Yeah, exactly. Good. Good. Let's see. Let's go with Gmail. Okay, more questions. More questions. How will our essays be graded? I'm not really sure, Zach. Meaning you have a possible 40 points on the essays. If you're asking, are they going to be graded leniently or harshly? I think I'm gonna grade them realistically, and see if you answer the question. That's all. I'm not gonna. Again, remember, guys, you're taking a test, and yes, you had time to prepare for the test, and yes, you had the essay questions ahead of time, but but it's still, a pressurized environment, and you're still being scrutinized, and it's still, you're going to be sitting there with a lot of pressure. It's 20% of your grade, so you're going to feel that pressure, and so I take that into account. Okay, so that's how I'm going to do it. Blah 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 blah. Shin, is Menachem Begin important? Menachem Begin is really important. For the context of our tests, no, but he's really important though. What do you mean by write a thesis? What is the thesis supposed to be about? Like, what am I supposed to argue? You're given a writing prompt. Again, you're given you're given an essay question basically, and you have to write a thesis in answering that writing question. That's what you have. Okay. What are the white papers? White papers are papers printed on white paper. Haha, it's funny, right? Good stuff. Now, the white papers are, from the context of the British government, it is an explanation of the policy of what the British government is. It usually comes after an investigation done by the British government into a specific matter, and then the British government issues a report. And the report is generally, again, called a white paper, or given the title white paper. And it's still, the British government still uses the term white paper today to describe these kinds of reports. Okay, so that's what they are. The white papers, in the context of Palestine in the British context in the 1920s and 1930s, they're used to explain the British policy towards Palestine. That's what they're used for. And that's their goal. Their goal is to provide an explanation as to the British policy concerning Palestine. Okay? Oh, yeah. Wow. Golden State are not hitting their threes tonight. Okay, what was cultural Zionism? Cultural Zionism believes that, very simply, that the land of Israel and the revival of the Jewish people in the land of Israel needs to be done through the creation of Jewish culture in the land of Israel, through the creation of universities, through the creation of through the writings of Jewish authors, and that the revival of Jews in the land of Israel is going to be done through culture, and that's the key aspect. Okay. Do we need to know about John Locke? A bunch of you guys have asked this over the last couple of days. We talked about John Locke only to introduce the concept of emancipation and giving rights, and that's how and why we use John Locke. So that's all you really need to know about John Locke. So we have to know each form of Zionism in detail. Yeah, well, we talked about in class. That's what you need to know. Why did the Sepoy Mutiny rebel? Well, no, the Sepoy Mutiny is a rebellion. That's what it is. The Sepoys rebelled because they were not happy about the way that they were being treated by the British. They felt that they were being taken advantage of by the British. We talked about the the argument that they used, that the musket balls that they had to use in order to fire weapons, they had to put it in their mouth, and it was covered in pig's fat, and so they rebelled. And what this basically did was it changed the nature of control in India. Excuse me. India was controlled by the British East India Company before the middle of the 1850s, but after the middle of the 1850s, India came under the direct control of the British government itself. Okay. Oh, blah blah blah. Let's see. Okay. Elisa, my printer is out of paper. Do you want me to send you some more printer paper? You can Amazon Prime it. You can get it in a couple of hours. Does each person have a different essay, or will get the? No, you will get the same essay. That's something I changed from what I originally said. Everyone is getting the same essay question, to be fair. Okay, and that's what we're gonna do. Good. Let us move on. If you put one lasagna on top of another lasagna, does it become one lasagna? Brian, these questions are, these are really philosophical questions here that have me questioning the meaning of life. So thank you for these questions. I really appreciate it. Okay. Molly, which essay will it be? Molly, if you're going to ask that question, at least you can put a question mark at the end of it to make it grammatically correct. I'm certainly not going to answer it if you don't add a question mark at the end. So come on, at least do that for me, please. Shira, same thing. If you're going to ask a question, at least give me a question mark at the end so that I can, at least do that. I'm tired, guys. I don't know about you guys. I'm exhausted. It's not like I was, obviously you guys were up studying chemistry last night and doing that. But, teachers have it hard too. Those teachers who are who had to be there in the test with you, who were proctoring, I had to stay up last night, practice my proctoring. It wasn't easy. It was tough. It was tough work. I had to practice my proctoring, make sure that I was, shushing you guys correctly. But yeah, thank you, Sammy. I appreciate that. Yeah. One of the nice things about moving to Teaneck is that hopefully we'll have some more peace and quiet here, not the noise of living in New York City. Thank you, Molly, and you, Shira, also for giving me the question mark. But no, I will not be telling you or giving you a hint as to which essay question this will be. Sorry. Uh-oh. Is LeBron down? That's not LeBron. All right, other questions. We're going on 2 hours now. Wow, pretty good. When are we moving to Teaneck? In like 3 weeks. Yeah, in like 3 weeks. That's we're moving soon. Pretty crazy stuff. When are we moving to? A question. Yeah, just about 3 weeks. Shabbaton at the Zadoffs when you move? Sure, absolutely. I think most of you guys are going to be like, going off to Israel or going to your summer programs. So I don't think you'll be around for that. But yeah, sure. That that first Shabbos, we can we'll have a Shabbaton. Can I explain socialism? So Evan, socialism is you can view it in the context of a couple of ways. Socialism is sort of one of the first steps or model or ways towards. That was a great play by Durant, by the way. Towards communism. Socialism is when government takes an active role in business and in the economy. And so, wow, Durant's having look at that. I told you guys, monster game from Durant, right? 12.7 boards. This is gonna be Durant versus LeBron. Socialism again is where government takes greater involvement in running the economy. It doesn't take complete control of the economy, such as the communist model, but it has greater involvement and greater engagement in it. So that's what socialism really is. Am I a pineapple pizza guy? Unfortunately, Brian, I don't eat pizza. If I did eat pizza, I guess I would be a pineapple guy, but I'm not. Aliza is waiting for me to spill the DBQs. we would have to go pretty late in order for that to happen. I don't think it's going to happen at 9:40 at night. So yeah, it's gonna have to be much later. Like, you know, we're gonna have to be going at 2-3 o'clock in the morning in order to get this out of me. But even then, I'm pretty sure it's not gonna happen. Okay. What are the DBQs? Everything is the DBQ, Brian. Everything is the DBQ. I'm not really sure what that means though, but everything is the DBQ. Okay. Are there? Let's play this game. Any more real questions? Any more real questions? Doc, who's gonna win? I'm still predicting the Warriors. Steph dropping 50. How many points did Steph have in the first quarter? I don't think he's gonna drop 50 tonight. Maybe Durant will, but not Steph. I don't care, Carly, pencil or pen. I don't care. Just if you're gonna write in pen, just make sure it's black or blue. I don't care though. Either is fine. Okay. Anything is fine for me. Was the French Revolution good or bad? That's not really part of this, so you don't need to know that. So we have no specific battles. No, meaning no. I'm not really expecting you to know specific battles. That's not really that. It's not really important at all. Okay. Any other substantive question? Oh God, Remy, that's an amazing question. Thank you. Thank you, and I'm going to remember that, Remy. That's a fantastic question. Any other real questions you guys want to ask? What was World War I? World War I was actually a musical, Brian. It was a Gilbert and Sullivan musical. That's what it was. Nothing else. Can I beat Steph in a one-on-one? Probably. If we were going one-on-one in history, there you go. Really funny stuff. Hilarious. Zach, which question are you talking about specifically? And yes, you can email me tomorrow with questions. I will be at Frisch tomorrow. So if you guys happen to be there, I will be there tomorrow. Sorry, 1 second. For some reason, my wife was calling me from the other room. I'm not really sure why. Let's see. I'm just going to text her. Still on. Okay, good. Blah, blah, blah. Okay. Yeah, Zach, I see the question. Did Hitler bring back militarism, nationalism, and alliance cause? Did Hitler bringing back militarism, nationalism, alliances cause world? Yeah, meaning sure. Hitler bringing back militarism and putting a renewed focus on militarism played a role in creating the Second World War. Absolutely. Yeah, there's no question about that, and that's the rise of Germany in that end was a part of the rise of the cause of the Second World War. Okay. Can I explain the Einsatzgruppen plan? Yeah, very simple. The Einsatzgruppen was given the responsibility of the Einsatzgruppen came in after. Remember, let's start this way. Sorry, Evan. The summer of 1941, Germany invades the Soviet Union. Again, going back on their promise not to. After the initial German army, after the German forces came in, then the Einsatzgruppen came in. They were mobile killing units. They were responsible for killing what they deemed to be the enemies of the German state, and that included Jews. And so the Einsatzgruppen were extremely efficient in killing the enemies. We saw the report of the Einsatzgruppe 5. They killed 120,000, 130,000 Jews in Lithuania in a 5-month period. That ended up being about 90% of the Jews killed in Lithuania during the Holocaust. So they were extremely efficient in what they were doing, and that's what their goal was. Oops, step for fruit 3. Nope. Okay, that's what the Einstein group did. No, the individual museum projects are not on the exam. Did they work with the government, or were they? No, they presumably they had orders. They did have orders. I mean, that's clear. There were orders. Someone gave the Einstein group of orders. Where their orders came from, it's not clear. Did they come from Hitler? Did they come from other parts of the government? Wow, Steph can't buy a 3 tonight. This is not. Steph needs to start hitting 3s. Wow. So, Remy, now we're getting into these amazing questions. Okay. Can you say one more time why people in Russia revolted for the second time when Stalin was in power? They were. It wasn't a revolt the second while Stalin was in power. Stalin put into place various economic plans, 5-year plans. They ended up hurting. The people of Russia because they provided for they really did not provide enough food stuff for the people, and so people in Russia became extremely angry that their economic life was being altered and changed by Stalin, and so they began to rebel. But Stalin put it down very, very quickly and very easily. Do fish get thirst? Oh my gosh, these are fantastic questions. All right, I think we're done with the real questions. Any other real questions you guys have here? I think 2 hours and 20 minutes. That's a long time. Can you please open up the class haiku page? Oh, there you go. I said it. Let's see. Yeah, Ali, I answered museum projects. The museum projects are no. Doc, save me a seat next to you at graduation. The problem, so I'm sitting like all the way up front in graduation. So I don't know if we could do this all the way up front because it may look a little bit bad. So, but we can do this in the back. We'll go to the way back and do it in the back of the gym. All right. Any other questions? Any other final questions? Did the U.S. agree to the Treaty of Versailles or just back out after the rejection of the 14 points? The U.S. never agreed to the Treaty of Versailles. They never passed it. So they never agreed to it. All right. Is land gain after World War I considered a political change? Yeah, sure. I mean, it can be. So, Elisa, what's your question? Kayla, which source is my favorite? That's a great question. I don't think I have a favorite source. There are a number of favorite sources. I don't have a single favorite. Elisa, what's your question that you want me to ask? Let's see. Will you live near Pizzalicious? Yeah, we do live close. We will live close to Cedar Lane. So yes. Did World War I impact the growing of alliances? Sure, it changed alliances. And remember, the World War I is caused because of alliances, and it will change the nature of alliances after it. So so yeah, absolutely. What are my top 3 sources? you guys will literally try anything. Okay, any more questions? I'm going to give this one more minute. Aliza, you said you had a question you wanted to ask, but I don't see it. So any other final questions to be asked here? Did World War II actually happen? Yes. Yes. Why did Italy flip on the Triple Alliance? Because they were promised things by Britain and France. That's simply why. Yeah, no raffle, sorry. No raffle. Can you tell us which sources we should know? Because you should know the sources. Again, I'm not going to tell you which sources we had. You should go over the sources that we went through in class. I'm not going to tell you which ones we went through. That's your responsibility. Molly, can you explain the different alliances? I'm not going to explain it now, just because we actually, one of the first questions we went through is the different alliances leading up to the First World War. So to the very beginning of the video. So once we're done with this is gonna go up on YouTube, so you can look at that again. Okay. So yeah. Aliza, hi. Aliza, you're just delaying this, correct? Is that your plan? Hoping for me to get to slip up and tell you which the DBQ is. Can my wife do the review for a few minutes? Kayla, she's actually working right now, so so she is working she's working and on writing anecdotals for her class at SAR. So it's a little, she's busy now. So Aliza, what is your question? Okay. Brian, how did I propose? That's a great question. How crazy that someone who's running for the U.S. government denies the Holocaust. There are a couple of candidates like that. There's a guy in Illinois. There are a couple of candidates like that. Pretty crazy. How did I propose? We were supposed to run a race together, and I made shirts for the race, and I think the shirts basically just asked her, will you marry me? But she knew it was happening because we got married in January of 2007, but we had planned everything in January of 2006. So we knew, like, she knew we were getting engaged. She knew I actually designed her engagement ring. So she had a general sense of what it was going to look like, but I actually sat down with the designer. We actually designed it together, and so that was a surprise to her as to what the engagement ring was going to look like. So that was fun. Anyway, what was the main cause of World War II? That Germany wanted to revenge and aid conquest and types of imperialism. Again, one of the causes of World War II is the rise of Germany and the remilitarization of Germany, and Germany looking to establish itself as a global empire. Remember, Germany calls itself the Third Reich, the Third German Empire. The first one was Charlemagne. The second, in the eyes of the Nazis, the first one was Charlemagne. The second one was Kaiser Wilhelm the First, and the third was going to be their government. So, so they see themselves as an empire, and that's what they're looking to build. I'm going to miss you too, Evan, but I'm still going to be at Frisch. You're still going to see me. If you were alive in that situation, and the only way to live was to say your favorite 3 sources, would you say? Yes, I would. I would. So that's true, Evan. You did grow over 2 years. That's very true. You did grow a lot. So yeah. Is Martin Luther my favorite person? No, Martin Luther is not my favorite person. I do like Martin Luther. I think Martin Luther is a key historical figure, but not my favorite historical person. So, all right. So I think we're done for the night. Oh, good God, Zach. Thank you for reminding me. Thank goodness Tuesday afternoons are done. No more. So, all right. If there are no more real questions, yeah, I'm not going to tell you the DBQ questions. So, is the picture behind you Nathaniel or Olivia? No, that's Olivia. That's an old picture of Olivia. She's like 6 months there. So that's like 3 years ago. So, so anyway, yeah, we have another photo shoot coming up and take pictures with Nathaniel and Olivia. Okay, guys, I think we'll end here. We've done this for almost 2.5 hours. Which I think is a record for us. Last year, and Jessica will remember this, and Evan, you'll remember this also, but last year, this is very different than last year. When last year we did the review in the hospital room after Nathaniel.
Yes, that was a pleasure.
After Nathaniel was born. That was great.
That's how much Dr. Zadoff loves you guys, that I was 12 hours after giving birth, and he was...
No, it wasn't 12. It was like 36.
I wasn't in the hospital that long.
Yeah, it was Tuesday night.
You were back in
No,
the apartment Tuesday night.
It was Monday night. It was Monday night. So it was Monday night. Yeah, it was like 36 hours after you gave birth.
Maybe you should take the math final.
Yeah, seriously, wouldn't it be good? Was a memorable moment. That's right. Sam, you have a question. Thank you, Zach.
Dr. Zadoff, I can answer anything.
I won't argue with Jessica. I appreciate that. Sam, you said you had a question you wanted to ask. Wow, allergies. Last year was crazy. The baby was crying the whole time. Yeah, Nathaniel was crying for a while.
Yes.
He was a newborn. So, is she usually right? Yeah, she's always right. Of course. Why is Chelsea so bad? Thank you, Sam, for that. All right, guys. Thank you. Good questions tonight. Seriously. This is gonna go up on YouTube when this is done. And yeah, I'll see you guys on Friday. And good luck studying. Again, if you have questions tomorrow, excuse me, if you have questions tomorrow, email me. She take over for a few minutes now. She has to work. She really has to work. And if you have questions tomorrow, please email me, and I will ask you and answer you. And yeah, guys, I really want to just relax. I know this is a lot, and I know you guys are stressed, and I know there's a lot of pressure on you. But just relax and take it in stride and really do your best. That's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for you guys to do your best. I'm looking for you guys to prep and to really do as well as you can. So yeah. All right, guys, it's been real. Have a great night for those coming to graduation. I will see you tomorrow evening at graduation. All right, guys, have a great night. Thanks. Bye.